Well, it's 7 o'clock in Manitoba. It's 5 o'clock on the Pacific Coast, 8 o'clock in Eastern Canada. And wherever you're listening from, it is Wednesday. And that means Farm to Market with my wonderful friend, knowledgeable person of 53 years in the ag industry, Harry Siemens of Siemens Says. Tonight, we have a very, very interesting show. Let's get into it. We're going to be talking about wild pigs, not wild hogs like the movie, wild pigs. Let's get it going right now. Well, good evening. My name is Karl Krebs. I'm the host of Things That Matter. And what we do talk about here is things that matter. And this particular series called Farm to Market is a wonderful series in which we want to help you understand what's driving the concerns in the food chain supply. What is of primary concern to you, to us, and where is it stemming from? And tonight's call here on May 1st, we're going to be talking about something I had no idea was happening. It's called wild pigs. Wow. We have wild pigs in Manitoba. Yes, we have them in other provinces, in fact. So we're going to step back and Harry Siemens, I'm going to bring him to the stage right now to give us an insight. Welcome to the show, Harry. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. You know, wild pig experts gathered to share best practices to combat the wild pig populations in Canada. We had people from Germany. We had people from Texas, Georgia, talking about how to get rid of, eradicate, not just sport hunting, eradicate wild pigs.
Well, and for the relevancy of what we want it to be, we want to know what are the things that are playing in the background. So in the past couple of episodes, last episode, we talked about the COOL program. And it ain't so cool, let me tell you, but it will cool the hog industry if the what it was certification of. Sorry, Harry, fill me in, help me. What's cool?
It's okay. It's called the voluntary country of origin labeling, which has been instituted, and it's not in effect until January 2026. But they've got time till May 17th to look at some of the rules to see if they can get some changes in order to make sure that the industries that are affected don't get decimated in certain areas. But I had the chance to be on with the United States Department of Agriculture, FSIS, F-S-I-S, and they were on a webinar yesterday, and we had people all about, and it had to do with all the details about the voluntary country of origin labeling. And let me just one more time set the stage. You know, the United States Department of Agriculture, the U.S. government, is the biggest seller of food in the United States, you know, and you bet. And so they've got the school program, and then they have the military. And so they want to make sure, and it's a form of protectionism, no doubt about it. They want people to be able to, say, here's the country of origin labeling, made in USA, and you can get the flag.
Right. And at that point, to bring it right down to the nub of it, right to the heart of the matter is this animal has to have its entire life in that country to be certified as COOL, country of origin labeling. And this is going to have huge effects on the industry for sure. And that's particular to the hog industry. But this other issue right now, the one that you were at conference at last week in Brandon, let's just give a brief overlay of why this conference was called and what the intent was, please.
It was the first conference, and involved in that was the Animal Health Canada, and in conjunction with the Assiniboine Community College in Brandon, and Squeal on Pigs. Dr. Wayne Lees used to be the head veterinarian officer for Manitoba, is the coordinator. And so they got together in Brandon, and they called it the Canadian Wild Pig Summit. and that brings together all these experts from Canada, Europe, and the United States. And so we had we had about 75 people. So first of all, we had the reception on the Monday night. Then we had 15 presentations on Tuesday. This old guy was getting tired, by the time 2 o'clock rolled around for nap time, right?
Yeah.
And then on Wednesday, we went out to Spruce Woods Park. Why?
Mhm.
That's where families of wild pigs roam freely. And not that many people spot them. We didn't see any, but that's where they set up the traps. And so, there's, Ron Kostitian is the Manitoba Minister of Agriculture. He announced, together with Ag Canada, a $2.4 million grant. So it would take them through to 2026 in order, why? To eradicate. And one thing Dr. Lee's told me is that, number one, these aren't super pigs, but they're very smart. These aren't, angels. They're not flying pigs and all those kinds of things. Almost though. They can move 60, 70 miles an hour. And they go what's called a sounder. And I don't even know where that name comes from. But they go in sounder, which is a family of 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. And so the thing I found out about it at the conference was, they don't want people to go out there and hunt. When you or I see a wild pig, it's not about trying to get rid of that wild pig right there. You go on Squeal on Pigs website, report it so that it can be looked after properly.
Right. So here's the banner here. And I know you probably meant to say 60, 70 kilometers an hour instead of miles an hour, because that's grease lightning.
But I don't know. I don't know if it was an American.
Well,
hour,
let's make it more believable for the audience and say it's at a fairly good clip.
Oh, they clip along like crazy.
But this is interesting because let's go back and say, why did this happen? How did these animals make their way into our country? Because there was some point of entry where they came into our country. And I'm thinking of, let's say, the wolf population, that they wanted to bring it up in states like Montana, for example. And now the wolf population is a problem to some of the producers in that area. So you end up with a good intention, but a bad outcome. Is that what this is about?
1982, 1983, they imported these so-called wild pigs, wild boars, from Europe, and they thought, because they were eating the meat in Europe, they would bring it in here, and so people would start to farm them. But then all of a sudden, you see the snout on those things. I mean, they have the traps have 8,000 pounds pressure that they can stand. When they grab a pig and that pig goes, and I didn't see the pig example, but just a human being, right? Yes. So they have these traps, and one was out of elastic. It was a cloth trap. So the pig gets in there and tries to hit it, it'll fly back because the boar may be 1,000 pounds, but the pressure to keep that boar inside that trap is 8,000 pounds. So
that's what's necessary to contain this animal.
Totally, absolutely. Okay. And so so they brought them in. So before you knew it, they were escaping into the wild. And then farmers began to realize that this wasn't the panacea that they thought it was, right? So they started to let them out. And before you know it, you have them in the wild. Another interesting comment. Go ahead.
No, it's very similar to, let's just make sure our listeners get a real idea. The problem with mussels and that coming into our aquatic system through other waters, these things, they do transfer, and a pig wouldn't know where the boundary is. And so these things obviously are going to breed. They're going to have other little wild pigs that come in. And the point of contention, the real problem, is if they are to enter into our into our very domestic system, because the pig today is it's a domesticated animal, the ones that we bring to market. Is that correct, Harry?
Absolutely. And that's the biggest thing. They carry whole lot of diseases. And not only do they affect other pigs, they affect deer. They affect, whatever animal is out there. They can carry that disease, and before you know it, you don't know where it's coming. The biggest challenge that they have, the biggest fear that the hog industry in North America, United States, Canada, we are still free of African swine fever. But if African swine fever ever hits our industry, our borders shut down for almost a year.
Well, just like we had with mad cow, takes one animal to shut an entire industry down. So this flu that you mentioned, is it found in wild pigs? Does it live there? Okay.
Yeah, it's found. Like the two guys there that were there from Germany, their title of their presentation was how to control the wild pigs amidst a disease outbreak. And it came from Warsaw. It came on the border of Germany. A wild boar picked up a piece of meat and brought it somehow to a domestic situation. It's very, very transferable. Like, it's really, really moves very much. So you can't even have a touch of it anywhere.
We talk about 3 degrees of separation in the world that we live in, right? We're all somehow connected to within 3 degrees. And what's happened with every industry, I think you could almost say every industry, perhaps a few, is that we're also intricately connected. And the consequence of one single event has a gigantic ripple effect in the whole industry itself. So we're talking about one wild pig infiltrating a domestic situation, and we've got the potential for a shutdown in the hog industry. Harry, the hog industry, as you said it before, is a massive industry in Manitoba. We export how many million pigs a year to the U.S.?
Weanlings alone, 3 million from Manitoba.
Just from Manitoba.
Just from Manitoba. Those are weanlings, baby pigs. And so, yes. So it's a huge industry. I mean, the number of people that work in it, and the dollar value, 24, it's huge. And not only that, we export 90% of all pork produced in Canada is exported. So we feed other countries, not just our own. So we have a really good, solid economic generating industry, a sector of agriculture. And the other thing one must remember, like I always say, I write for Prairie Hog Country, a pig magazine. And I say a pig is a pig is a pig, whether Europe, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Texas, or Manitoba. So I can write about a pig story, it doesn't matter. But at the same time, every pig farmer needs a grain farmer, because we need feed. You need the feed to feed those pigs. So it's really an intricate industry that reaches wide.
Well, certainly the matter at hand, talking about wild pigs and the potential to affect our domesticated pigs, is big enough to warrant a multi-day convention in Brandon. And as you say, you had speakers beyond speakers. So again, what we're doing here on this segment of Farm to Market with Harry Siemens is bring to you some of the concerns. We want to make it relevant to your understanding of what's at stake here. We go to the market and we think there'll always be pork in the fridge to pick up, or beef, or so forth and so on. But simple things can affect our own food supply, and of course the price that we're paying. Because as we started to single out some of these events, they're all connected. And in the end, it's going to manifest itself in the availability and the price we pay in the market.
That's a story I did just several weeks ago, that really it's the consumer that's going to pay when it comes to the lack of product. It just keeps going up, whether it's the country of origin labeling we talked about, or whether it's the wild pig that brings in African swine fever and shuts down the industry. Like we have all kinds of diseases. Biosecurity and biotechnology is such a huge issue. I used to be able to walk into just about any hog barns. And then I had to start taking showers in and showers out, right? And
Yes.
now it's absolutely impossible for me to get into a pig barn. I love to shoot the pictures myself. Now I've
Yeah.
got good
It,
Hutterite fellows that are telling me, Harry, you need a picture of a pig, let me know. But at the same time, I can't go in, and I probably never will.
No, you know what? And that's for years here. I remember as a commodity hauler, there were signs up everywhere, and they have different boots going into a barn and different boots coming out in the shower. And I had no idea that pigs were so susceptible to disease. But I'll tell you one thing: going into a pig barn, as we would say in German, "Das ist verboten." You ain't getting in
No,
because the risk is too great, and this also poses a risk. So as we look at our food supply, we want to be aware. And of course, as a consumer, as a person who has a vested interest in the safety of our food supply, and when it comes down to what actions we can take as citizens, we need to be aware that these agencies, and you mentioned this program, which I'm going to put the banner up again here just to show our listeners, Squeal on Pigs, that is funded by the Manitoba hog producers, is it not?
it's in part by Manitoba Pork
How
Council.
much of the provincial and federal government have a stake in this program?
It's pretty significant because they were the ones in part sponsoring. Like I said, $2.6 million over the next couple of years came from Manitoba government and the federal government because there is such a huge concern. This is not just Manitoba. This is Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC. And one other thing, I told my brother Jack when I was going out to Brandon, and he says, he says about wild pigs. And he says, yeah, he says, I just had a young friend who had gone to the United States. And what did he do? He went boar hunting, wild pig hunting in southern Texas. And see, there they can shoot them. And let me give you one other thing. And as far as, when somebody in Manitoba, in Canada, it catches a sounder, a group of wild pigs, they can't do anything with them. If it happens during the night, they have to leave them there until the morning. And then they have to have a proper way of, euthanizing them or whatever they want. But in Texas, they can go in the United States, I should say, they can go right in there and shoot them and get rid of them.
Okay, so that brings up a topic. You and I both know hunters. Hunters love to go out and hunt. And anytime there's game available, whether it's for personal consumption, which in this case it wouldn't be, but let's just say has the government in the discussions entertained a bounty where, when you have a problem like this and knowing that hunters are active, is it even conceivable that the hunters could be brought in as a solution to the means? Because hunters will gather and go and there's the excitement of the hunt. We all know that. I did hunting too. Is that even a possibility? Has that even been brought onto the table for discussion?
In fact, the absolute opposite. They don't want anybody shooting these wild pigs. You know why?
Yeah, I'm curious. Tell me why.
For the simple reason. So, and it was interesting. I heard it. I've heard it a number of times. So I asked somebody. Well, it basically has to do with if a wild pig is shot and there's another 8 or 9, they see what's happened and they will never come. They learn. They are so smart. They can learn from that particular episode that they will not be available in that same spot again. That is the reason why. But at the same time, there are still some people doing it, but really they don't want people to do it because they seem to increase. I use the example that maybe, when a wild boar gets shot, there's 10 that come to the funeral and then they breed and have another 20 before, 6 months is out.
Right.
Not quite that way, but almost, like they said, they're so smart.
I think the other thing that might factor in is the fact that the meat, there's always going to be some gut pile, some discard of this animal left that other animals feed on, not knowing how that would affect another animal. I don't know that, but I'm just speculating on that. So better to just trap them and remove them. In that way, you've got the whole animal out of the food chain supply, whether it's in the wild or anything else that might happen.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And the, disposing is such an important part, because it's that little piece of pork that's left lying out in the wild that's picked up by another wild pig, and before you know it, it drops it on a domestic market or domestic farm, and next thing, bingo, you've got an outbreak of the disease. And
so what's the estimated population? Usually when these problems are brought to light, they have an estimate of what the population is of such of an animal here. Any ideas where we're at on those?
You know what? They stayed away from giving us numbers, for the simple reason that they don't know.
Okay.
Because they're out there. You have no idea the sophistication, the drones that they were demonstrating, where they, in order to set up a trap, they have to make sure that these wild beasts come walking along that track. I mean, I walked up, I'm not young anymore, and we walked up this pathway, and here's where they had the trap set up, and the guy with his drone, one drone was this big, another drone he carried on the back of his half ton. And so they're flying these things not during the daytime, but during the nighttime, because they can actually spot that these wild pigs have been in the area. They don't get very many shots of these wild pigs. They just get the traces, and they call it, I forget the term they use, but there's a term that they use where these drones and their infrared or whatever technology they use, that they then set up the pathway. And here they can see that this is where these wild pigs have been walking, running, whatever they may, set up the trap, open it up, and it can be 2, it can be 8, it can be 9 that are walking as a sounder, they call it, and they get inside and bingo, the trap.
I always thought it was a herd of pigs, but you're calling it a sounder. That's a new term for me, but thank you.
That's exactly what they use, and I need to find out where that comes from. But
yeah. So for those of you that are just coming in here at the 22-minute mark, I've been speaking with Harry Siemens. Siemens Says, a 53-year veteran of the ag industry, and he was just at a conference talking about the problem that is in at least 5 different provinces of Canada called wild pigs, and how it can threaten our industry of hog, it can affect the hog industry here. Harry, is the cost, like you mentioned, $2.4 million being pledged, does that somehow reflect itself in the cost to the producer or in the price that people are paying? How's that being absorbed?
Well, it obviously, that was a grant from government, and you know where that money comes from.
Yeah.
And Manitoba Pork Council, they go via fees, check off as far as each pig is concerned. But Manitoba Pork Council, in my opinion, is one of the best pig producer organizations in the country. They do an amazing job. And so anyway, I just wanted to say one other thing. Wild pigs are now considered an invasive species in Canada. And that was another significant thing. They cause ecological damage, wildlife habitat destruction, crop damage, and human safety concerns. We went into, when we first got off the bus into Spruce Woods Park, we went into an area, a clearing, and there were, probably deep ruts like this. And those ruts have been caused by wild pigs looking for food. They search under the ground, and as one guy said, as long as there's a touch of calorie in anything that they grab hold of, they can exist. They give them some water and give them something to eat, but that's how they destroy things. They'll take a cornfield and just plow it like a plow, like it just going straight through. So it's an invasive species, but at the same time, they can't fly, and at the same time, we need to be careful that when you see one, get going and report it.
Right. I was just going to say, boy, my mind, all kinds of files were popping up. And one thing we know about pigs, they'll eat anything. I mean, we just have to go back to that horrible, horrible incident in BC with the pig farmer and the disposal of of life. Like these are aggressive. These animals, even the domestic ones, will eat anything. But is the wild pig even more aggressive that if you encountered one in the wild, like a boar, for example, instead of a sow, is this thing going to charge you? Like I've seen some video of it, of guys going and hunting, and they want the boars, of course, with the trophy tusks on the face and everything. But this is an aggressive animal, is it not?
Totally, 100%. Yeah, you don't want them as your pet. And you know what, Carl? I'm sure you're a very strong man, but you take a 500-pound boar and it comes after you, want to jump.
I ain't pig wrestling.
So absolutely aggressive, but at the same time, I just want to make sure, I was really happy. There was two journalists, one myself and another one invited, Ed White from the Western Producer. He and I are great friends, and we were invited to this particular function. And I just have only good things to say as far as the conference was concerned and how they treated it and the information that was there. I mean, I learned so much in those 2 days that I was ready to pack it in and go home, because 2.5 days of wild pig stuff, it's a lot.
You've got a lot of followers on the different platforms that you're on. What's been the response as you've shared some of your thoughts coming out of this conference? I mean, obviously you cover the ag industry in a broad form, but what's the response from your hog producers that you directly communicate with?
Well, it's interesting. So many of the hog producers, they've got their minds on the domestic market, and so they tell you about it. And at the same time, they're happy to see that there's somebody trying to get rid of them. But most people don't understand the severity of the problem. And as they said it, if African swine fever were introduced into the domestic population, 90% of our meat is for exports. We couldn't export one piece of pork for a time period.
The Iron Curtain comes down and nothing's going out. And we have two massive facilities in Manitoba, the one in Brandon and the one in Neepawa, that export millions of weanlings and of course, processed pork as well. And so this is a real threat. And unbeknownst to me, when you told me that you were going to a pig conference, I said, a wild pig conference? What is that? Is that some chapter of Hell's Angels, or where are you going, buddy? And
Harry got off his rocker on this one.
Yeah, you're way out there. I thought, well, he's taking on a new lifestyle, I guess. But anyway, no, the seriousness of it is that we could expect to see these animals. Like, I spend a lot of time in nature. I love to go camping and fishing. You could expect to see this animal, but is it primarily limited to southern Manitoba, into sort of the heavy grain producing areas of Manitoba, or could you expect to see one up in the Interlake area or even in the northern areas of Manitoba? Let's just talk Manitoba here for a second.
When Manitoba, when they first got into the wild, was on the north side of number 1 highway. In the Interlake maybe, but also Beausejour and those kinds of areas where the people had brought them in to start a new industry. And then all of a sudden one gets out, another gets out, and before you know it, they say, boom, they're gone. So it's really hard to, I didn't see a wild pig, but I saw the track, the hoof marks, it's a heavy, when you have solid ground and the hoof mark goes that far in, that they're carrying some weight, right? Yeah. So we've got them in the Riding Mountain National Park. We have them in, all over the place. But do we see them? You may see one, you may see two, but at the same time, not a lot of people keep spotting them. But at the same time, they're out there, and there are people who are actually spotting them.
Yeah. So one of the things that came up, and I'm putting up this website again that people can respond to, in the Coles notes that you gave me prior to the show, were two things mentioned: persistence, to see this thing through, as you said, to eradication, and the involvement of community. So this is a website set up. You ever see a wild pig out there? And I guess you're going to know the difference. Their color is different. Their demeanor is different. I think you mentioned the size of the snout. This does not look
Well,
like a regular pig, right?
oh, huge. I mean, it's huge, and they travel in families.
Ah, in
Travel.
these sounders, as you call them. Okay. So just in some closing remarks as we come to the bottom of the hour here, how did this impress upon you, you know, the fragility perhaps of our food chain supply in the way that we rely on our producers to bring, you know, the products to our market, to produce for other countries, jobs and so forth. Just give us a little wrap on this, how this really spoke to you about this problem.
Well, it spoke to me from several areas. Number one, this is, an animal that is threatening an industry if we don't look after it properly. But you know something? We have animal activists that want to do away with the hog industry even worse than anything else. So we have, you may see an animal activist saying, hey, bring on the wild pigs, right? That way we'll destroy the domestic market. That's not, I'm not being facetious in any way, shape, or form. But at the same time, when you look at the industry we have, I've been involved, as you've mentioned a few times. I've seen the pig industry grow up from 1971. I fed pigs on my dad's farm. But then that's when I started to see the industry grow. We have people. I mean, we can talk about the plant here in Winkler, Winkler Meats, like they employ, once they finish the expansion, 150 people and so forth. And the economic benefits that we get from the pig industry is something else. A couple of processing plants. So you know what, Carl? I think we just need to be vigilant, make sure, I don't want to scare anybody, but at the same time, we want to just make sure, as we can see on the screen, you see a wild boar, wild pig, whatever it may be, get online, squeal on pigs, and you report it, make a phone call, and we'll see what we can do with it.
Yeah. So it's important, I mean, to be aware that this situation is out there, that it's obviously being given the appropriate amount of attention. And as you say, the end goal is to eradicate this. So don't consider it to be something of an amusement or just take a picture. Take action, because persistence and participation are going to help this problem. And in some way, some little tiny way, you're doing your part to preserve the industry. So, Harry, thank you for being here. Give us, in a closing remark, what else you're seeing on the back burner right now, because we're going to have you on again next week. What's playing in the background that you're going to bring to our minds right now?
The biggest thing right now, of course, is planting. And I put a survey out there on Twitter asking farmers about how things going forward. Well, you know what? We've got costs, we've got commodity prices, we've got some areas that are dry, some areas that are too wet. But at the same time, the farmer continues to put the food on the table. And I love supporting the farmer, having been an advocate for all these years. That's Siemens Says. Somewhere, sometime, somehow, I will see you again.
Well, we'll see you again here again. Thank you so much, Harry, for your time. And we'll see you again here next week on Farm to Market. Well, folks, things that matter. That's the concept here. That's the idea. We want to bring some stories. And for some of you, Farm to Market, that might not be your bag. Maybe you're not so interested in what's happening. But I can tell you this much. The intent of it was to spell out concerns and give you correct information, correct background to what ultimately is going to happen. Because you and I and everybody out there is always concerned about what's in it for me. How does this affect me? This is a problem that is being dealt with. And there are many other challenges. And as Harry would say, the producer is the best suited individual to care for the land and the animals that they raise. And thank God we've got good producers out there. So coming up this week, tomorrow is our health chat. We're going to be talking about age reversing all natural health technology with Judy Friesen. And Friday, I want to tell you, do not miss TGIF for Faith. I have a wonderful young lady, Turi Johnson, who has shared her story, who spoke bravely at an event months ago, which put her on the stage. She's going to be sharing her faith on Friday. So for now, this is Karl Krebs. These are certainly what I think are things that matter. God bless you. We'll see you again soon here.